Podcasters Roundtable round 146. How do you know that your podcast is yours? I titled it something like that. You'll find out. It's in the articles. But welcome, everyone. Let's meet the roundtable. We have a nice, what I would say is a full roundtable. Sometimes you don't have this many people, Dave. So Dave Jackson, co-host, welcome back.
Yeah, Dave Jackson from the schoolofpodcasting.com. Glad to be here.
Awesome. All right. And new roundtabler, all new roundtablers. I think sometimes I get that wrong, which is super embarrassing because if you've been here before and I don't know it, that's bad. But you know, if you produce enough episodes, that's good. That means that's what that means. For me, it just means I have a bad memory. Aseloka, welcome to your first roundtable.
Hi there. I'm Aseloka Smith from the Colored Girl Beautiful podcast.
Very cool. And what's the URL for that?
Coloredgirlbeautiful.com.
Very cool. All right. And Derek, first time, I think, right?
Yep.
Welcome.
Thanks for having me. I'm Derek Graziano. I'm from a couple different podcasts, but my main one is Rolling Misadventures, and you can find that at rollingmisadventures.com.
So I don't immediately know what that is. What's that about?
So Rolling Misadventures is a podcast that brings a bunch of hosts from other shows together to play a tabletop game. And then afterwards, I spin that into improvised audio fiction, typically 1 to 2 episode story arcs with sound design and backing scores.
Wow. Yes, I like it, right? You see, podcasts allow you to do something different. It sounds different to me. That's cool. And Aseloka, what is your show? Like, it's put people on the spot with like, what's your elevator pitch?
My podcast is about Black womanhood in short, but it's framed around this book that was written in 1916, so just over 100 years ago, by a woman named Emma Zelia Hackley. It's the first etiquette book written for Black women. So it's sort of my take on some of the things in the book, some of the things that I really enjoyed or disagree with, and I talk with other Black women about those topics.
That's cool. And so is that an original idea? Did you see someone doing that with podcasts before, or how did you come up with that?
I did not.
Because I have not heard of that before.
Yeah,
cool.
I did not see it. And it was very nerve-wracking trying to like figure out what it was that I actually wanted to do and, you know, how to frame it. Because the show is actually season 1 is in the form of a letter written to the author. So it's sort of bookended with this letter. And then the conversation that I have with another Black woman. And then there's my producer and I sort of expanding a little bit, sort of adding some narration and context for that conversation as well.
That's cool. It feels, I'm like, you turn that into a movie? It sounds so like, and is the book is it like public domain, given that it's so old?
It's out of copyright, so I can do whatever I want with it.
Right.
Nice.
All right.
Yeah.
We might bring that up. All right. Well, awesome. Thank you. And another new roundtabler, Danielle, welcome.
Yes. Hi, I'm Danielle Desir. I am the founder of Women of Color Podcasters, a Facebook community of over 3,300 women of color from over 50 countries worldwide. I am also the host of the Thought Card podcast, which is an affordable travel and personal finance podcast all about helping financially savvy travelers make informed financial decisions.
Yeah. And is there a conference coming up? I'm seeing the promo.
Yes. Well, that's great that you're seeing the promo. That means we're visible and out there. Yeah. So I am the co-founder of Podthon, which is we have our second annual virtual podcast summit, and we're really highlighting speakers of color. So we have over 30 podcasters who are attending as speakers, and it's going to be so much fun. 2 days this weekend.
This weekend. All
this
right,
weekend,
so
yeah.
July 16th today. So if you're watching live, you can tune in. Otherwise, is that available afterwards?
Yes. If you get the all access pass, there is a replay, and it has all the replays and additional bonus videos and freebies and things like that.
Awesome. Well, good luck. That is really cool.
Thank you.
Everyone's doing such cool things. I got to do more, Dave.
That's it.
Just doing this little show, the roundtable. Everyone, Dave, you do a lot. All right, let's get to some stories. Let's start off. Actually, we'll start Danielle at the top of the list here with the first story. Michelle Obama is getting an exclusive Spotify podcast.
Yes, I actually got the email from Spotify, and when I opened it, I was like, "Whoa, Michelle Obama is having this show!" So it was super exciting, and I just started Googling, and then I just saw articles that were coming out. But interestingly enough, in the Facebook group, so many of our members are so excited. People have literally texted me, said, "You need to tweet her and tell her that we have a Facebook community that she can join." So all day I've been literally almost harassing her and just telling her "Hey, we're here." And it would be awesome if you join. But I think what's interesting is that, again, Spotify is really going after these exclusive deals with these really A-list, high-list celebrities. So we have the Joe Rogan, we have now Michelle Obama, we have Kim Kardashian. There's just I think that they're definitely tabling that sector of the market, which is interesting. And I wonder who else are they going to get besides Michelle? I feel like that's
spending
pretty high.
Lots of money. We kind of know why, right? I mean, there's other than it's not just competing with Apple to become like the podcast space. We know that they have to pay music artists money and they don't have to pay podcast money. Like they are paying money. They're paying money to these exclusive podcasts. So the less than 1% is getting a ton of money, but the average indie podcaster is not seeing any. So it could create some issues. Aseloka, you had a story on here that I think ties into this. What was this? The Leo Laporte thing?
I just randomly came across this in one of the newsletters that I subscribe to, and I kind of check in and out with these things. I subscribe to a zillion different newsletters, but this caught my eye particularly because I also, very much like Danielle, I got the email from Spotify this morning. I'm texting people. I reached out to my producer, did you see this? And I was so excited, and then got really disappointed when I saw that it was, a Spotify only podcast, even though it's free. That, gate is what I'm not super excited about.
Is it really a podcast? I mean, that is the question when Joe got signed.
Well,
is he really, he basically cashed in podcasting and he's now like a Spotify show, right? And we joke about that, but there is some seriousness to that. And I think, which is in this article that you have, in that if it's not available via RSS feed, right, you have to go to Spotify. You're really subscribing to almost the Spotify channel. It's not sort of open and accessible. Now it is free, like you mentioned, but there are some potential pitfalls of that, right?
Exactly. This quote from the article that I highlighted is sort of the overall takeaway for me. But it says that Spotify wants to move away from RSS feeds, which are hard to monetize, to something that exists only on their platform, which is easy to monetize. So they want to keep control of all the stats. They want to know who's listening, and how long people have listened, and know all of those demographics. And I'm just disappointed that you can sort of see the podcast industry starting to close off and become beneficial to only a very small amount of people. As much as I love Michelle Obama, I was really disappointed to see, this again, it's this sort of walled garden. It's free, but you have to be there to access the content, and that's really frustrating.
And sort of like YouTube, right?
Yeah. Well, and I think the plan is, if they get enough people that okay, I'll go over, I'm in Overcast, but I'll go over and listen to Joe. Oh, and while I'm here, I'll listen to Michelle Obama, but now I got to go back to Overcast to listen to my other favorites. Oh, and then they get somebody else. So they just hope eventually the keeping track of two apps and, oh wait, where do I listen to this one again? It's kind of like now, if I go to watch a program, I'm like, was I watching that on Netflix or HBO? Wait, was it in Amazon?
Yeah, which app do I have open?
Yeah, and eventually, I guess their thought is it'll be so, I don't know, cumbersome that you'll just go to Spotify. And I'm like, hey, for all the bazillions of dollars they're spending, why not spend, I don't know, probably a pinch of that to make an actual decent experience of listening to podcasts on Spotify?
Yes.
I was like, there's no... it's just awful.
That's the whole reason I refuse. I won't. I use Pocket Cast for all of my listening, and it just makes it so much easier for me. I don't have to search around for every single episode of all this because I subscribe to a zillion different shows.
But
But Pocket Cast,
we know you're gonna go listen to Michelle. Like you're.
I mean,
right?
I have to find some kind of way.
You know what? It drives me crazy about Spotify is if you share, like, you can't go from social, you can't listen on the web. Like, if you use the app, it's free. In fact, you can't actually use the free version of the app to like play, at least with songs. I don't know, a podcast. I can listen free on the app, like the app on my desktop. Like they make it very cumbersome, and maybe that goes to Dave's point. Like,
yeah.
but
I mean,
that's
I listened to the trailer on the web.
Yeah, I hope so. Jeez.
Yeah.
Well,
like
but
on the Spotify website. So and I've listened like on my desktop. So, if I'm at my computer working, I can find my way to Michelle Obama's podcast. But in general, I just like I do a lot of listening in my car. I can just, I get in my car, my phone hooks up automatically. I press play and I don't have to search around. What am I doing? I can't do that if the show is on Spotify.
Mm-hmm.
Danielle,
and as far as the podcaster side of it, like most of us know what it's like trying to play a podcast on Spotify versus, Pocket Cast or Podcast Addict, whichever app you want to use. And I have a feeling that with the big names that we're seeing them sign, like most podcasters probably aren't going to want to listen to Kim Kardashian. I'm just going to take a wild swing on that one. Michelle Obama, yeah, absolutely would be one I would want to check out. But with them trying to bring in more of a mainstream audience, maybe people that don't listen to other podcasts, they're the people that just listen to Rogan or Howard Stern or whoever, they're going to generally be the people that are also the binge culture that want to listen to 2, 3, 4 episodes as one experience and then walk away and do something else.
That is a really good point about audience, because I feel like a lot of the people who are drawn to podcasts because of some celebrity name, they're often not like the long-term, I'm going to tune in every week or however often to listen to this content. It's just kind of like, oh, this is a really cool thing and I want to jump in. I don't know. Maybe that's off, but it feels like those are different audiences to me.
Yeah.
The other thing that's going to be different is with Luminary, we have, which is another walled garden that's apparently losing millions of dollars a month or a ton. Because I know now, I just heard where one of their exclusive shows, apparently their contract is up or whatever, but they're like, yeah, I'm getting out of this boat because it's going down. Spotify seems to be just printing money. And I'm like, okay. And that's why they love podcasts. I mean, this show is 90 minutes long. Typically it's supposed to be an hour. It's usually 90 minutes long. That would be 22 and a half songs that they would have to pay for if a song is 4 minutes long. And that would then be, now Spotify, it's fun with math. Spotify pays 0.00437 cents. It's almost like I'm looking at a spreadsheet, which would mean that we would make 9 cents per download per episode. And then if we got 150 downloads, we would be making $14 an episode if we were musicians, but we're not. But that's what Spotify is saving by having the Podcasters Roundtable on there. Wasn't that fun? Everybody's brain got a brain cramp, but trust me, it's all Todd Robbins.
As soon as you said spreadsheet.
I was like, oh, I get it.
Yeah.
I like the numbers.
Well, it's all Todd and Rob were talking about that on the new media show, and I was like, wait a minute, I'm going to do the numbers on that.
Danielle, you were trying to say something.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because Michelle Obama is going to attract a very different audience from Joe Rogan. So they're also segmenting who they're attracting as well. So that is very interesting. Number 2, I think Spotify should look at like the Netflix versus HBO versus Amazon, because I'm sure most of us have maybe all 3 of them. So I don't know that just having exclusivity at Spotify is going to deter people from having other apps. Like I actually use Apple Podcasts. I hate it, but it's what I have. And I don't feel like downloading something else. I usually don't have storage on my phone to do that anyway. So it's just really interesting. But I think that's what they want to be known for. They want to be known for these, A-list, like high level celebrities, which is very different from everyone else.
Didn't they buy Bill Simmons? Isn't Bill Simmons the sports guy?
Gimlet the Ringer or something like that.
Yeah.
The network, I think.
Mm-hmm.
So you got Gimlet. I mean, they're just spinning cash. They're spinning investor cash, right? I mean, I don't think they're making money. So it's a gamble, right? And so these big names, the goal is that they, a name like Michelle is big enough to pull people who may not listen to podcasts, who listen to a podcast on a different platform. With Rogan, that's what they're going with. I mean, Rogan's I was going to say aspect. I got to finish the word because I just said Rogan's aspect. The aspect of Rogan was that he had a massive channel on YouTube, which is also being pulled in. I mean, Spotify apparently is making a video friendly part of the app just for him, like just for that show. So they're hoping that audience comes over. So these names, again, the less than 1% are able to pull in people who normally wouldn't go through the trouble of using another app or something. And maybe that'll convert them. I don't know, but I am curious, what does it mean? What do we think it means for anyone listening to this show, right? The majority of podcast producers, the independents for most case, does this affect us in any way? I have some thoughts, but if anyone wants to go with that.
I honestly don't think it really is going to affect the indie podcast scene, mainly because if people are already listening to podcasts, or even specifically our own podcasts that are on Spotify, because I know plenty of them that are, they're not the ones that are popping up in the recommendations. That if it's people that are going to go check out Michelle Obama, Spotify is going to link you to one of their other top tier promotional podcasts like Joe Rogan or Kim Kardashian. They're not going to link the indie podcasts in with that.
If they're smart, they would find the tie-in, right? Like they would find in, if you got a demographic, any of those people have, a demographic that follows them, which they're going to know because they're on Spotify, and you got to give that information, or they collect that information. And if they were smart, they would match, because isn't the goal, their goal is the same as YouTube, keep you on Spotify as long as possible. This is why watch time became so important on YouTube, because they can serve you more ads. And isn't that where this is going, right? Isn't at some point, even if they're not serving ads on these big shows, or these big shows are free, aren't they going to put ads on our shows? And are we going to get a piece of that? And if we are, Dave just told us we're going to get about 9 cents per download, right? So, which makes sense. They got to pay for this somehow. So, that's why I wonder with, I fear that some podcasters can get locked in, right? Like some people put all their eggs in one basket. They build a YouTube channel, and then YouTube says you violated some terms of service that we're not even going to tell you what it was. You don't know what you did, and you're just cut off from your audience. That's the danger of not being an RSS feed, right? Being sort of captive to one platform. They can turn it off. They can disconnect you from your audience at any time you want. When you're a podcast, they can't do that. No matter how good or bad you are, someone can still get that RSS feed, even if you've been taken off a platform.
Yeah.
Is everyone here on Spotify? I think I'm on Spotify. I think we are.
Yeah.
I mean, technically, I have to have a Spotify account in order to see my podcast stats on Spotify.
Right.
But do I listen on Spotify? Not really, no.
Well, not many people. I mean, that's why I say of all our shows, I bet we don't have a massive audience, or the majority of our audience on Spotify. But I don't know if that matters.
I get a trickle, and then the podcast rodeo show, which is a much shorter show, and it's kind of get in and get out, has a fair chunk over there. And that was just one I was like, different. Don't know why.
We don't know why. I mean, the beauty of being in a walled garden is you typically get a ton of information because they're able to get a ton of information. Hopefully Spotify, you know what I mean? If I have to be on the platform, and I have to be, like if I want to be there, usually the exchange is, for an independent podcaster, the exchange is you give me more audience, and then they get your content, right? That's usually you're not playing the CPM game. You're not there for the money. Although I will say with YouTube, for me, I'm surprised at the money that I get from YouTube from like ads that are on YouTube. So there is potential for it to be a money generating platform for even independents. Because again, I'm shocked with how YouTube is able to. And I think because they are showing relevant ads, there are people who watch. But, you know, if Spotify starts putting ads in front of your content, Stitcher did this. Stitcher, you know, you were on Stitcher. I didn't like Stitcher because the audio quality wasn't good. I didn't like it because they put ads in my show. And people will complain. And then I would say, well, you have listeners there. And if they don't care enough to leave Stitcher, then it might bother you. But if it's not bothering them, does it matter? Right? Like, I mean, I don't know.
Yeah.
I said too much. Okay, good.
Oh, so like with my first podcast that ended a couple of years ago now, I specifically threw it up on YouTube just because A, it was free to do.
Right.
And B, I had maybe 3 or 4 people that would watch it there. Like they specifically asked for it to be there. I didn't care if YouTube threw ads on it. I didn't care if I saw a single penny from that, even if they did, because that's where my audience wanted it. Sure. Being an independent podcaster, I'm going to put it on there, say, here's your content, give me the downloads. It's someone checking it out. So then when I was able to start up Rolling Misadventures or any other projects I've worked on, there's, you know, at least 4 more people that might check it out.
Right. I mean, and, you know, we've talked about this in the past, but, you know, every listener counts and you don't know who's listening, right? If that one listener, what if Michelle tuned into your podcast? Like, it's completely feasible. I mean, she listens to podcasts. Anyone can listen. So like saying I only have 10 or 100 listeners on one platform, I mean, every person's important, I think. So, you know, there's this sort of be everywhere, right? As a podcast, how many of you do you have your podcast on YouTube? Because it's not a podcast directory, but if you're on some platforms will put it there for you. Like Dave works for Libsyn. Libsyn will put it there for you. We've debated before whether that's good or bad, but I think for the most part, it's not bad because someone might be looking for you there because that's where they consume. Danielle, are you on YouTube at all?
Yeah, I host with Libsyn and I just let YouTube do its thing. And I have like 17 subscribers passively that I didn't do anything for. So why not?
Right.
Why not?
Yeah. And even for me, like sometimes you can get those subs. And if you look at your retention, you see they're gone within the first 3 minutes, right? Because people typically aren't there to listen to a podcast. They might check it out. Or maybe, you know, I find that YouTube subs, I feel like people use the subscribe button on YouTube as a like button because I have a lot of subs that don't come back and watch the next video. There's a lot of reasons for that, but well, it's this discovery thing, right? So they know you exist, right? So one of those 17 people might not have known Danielle's show was there before they found it on YouTube. And maybe they even hopped off to a more podcast friendly platform, right? Doesn't mean they unsub. So, you know, I like the ability to be found somewhere people might be looking.
That's a good point.
The other thing that I do when I cut up my episodes and I actually think about the user intent for YouTube and I just, you know, put a new graphic on it, make sure that it's YouTube compliant. And it becomes like that one episode becomes 2 or 3. And those 2 clips are very particular. So for example, like what should I pack to go to Iceland? If we talked about that in the episode, that could be its own YouTube video. So I found a lot of success. And I think that mixed up my feed a little bit from just having my full blown episodes and also cutting up for just, you know, little clips as well.
Are you also, do you do video? Like you would kill with that, like what to pack
if
for
I did video.
Like
if only I didn't do
what to pack for and just insert the country.
That's a whole series.
Yes, and I mean, like show you packing your bag. Like that is super, like you'd crush on YouTube, I'd say, but you would.
For sure.
Well, in the same way that subscribers on YouTube doesn't always equal number of plays, we brought up Spotify, so I pulled up my Spotify. I have 3,000 followers for that show I mentioned earlier, and I get nowhere near 3,000 plays. Just like, oh, wow, look, 90 on one episode. I was like, so that may be something I could see where people will get excited about, like, oh, wow, I've got X amount of followers. I'm like, yeah, and they're not clicking. Because again, it's a little too easy. And there's, it goes back to that experience in Spotify that I don't know what that does. Besides,
well, you run in, not only like, is it easy? So that's good, right? The threshold was easy for them to subscribe. Awesome. Because they at some point decided they wanted to, But then you get into algorithms, right? Like what does, so many people like on YouTube, who knows how many channels I subscribe to. And one of the reasons all the subscribers don't come back is because YouTube does not show everything you release to your subscribers. Kind of like Facebook. It's almost pay to play these days. Like they're not going to show everything that you post. So, and I don't know that I have a real point, but we find that I always talk about podcast subscribers are different than YouTube subscribers in that if you have 2,000 podcast subscribers and you look in your stats, you release an episode, you'll find out that 50%, 75%, I can kind of count on that audience and even see it in the retention stats.
Yeah.
Whereas most of the time it does not work the same for YouTube. I don't know if any of you have found that, like that you found that your podcast subscribers are different than even things like Twitter followers or YouTube subscribers or anything that's outside of podcasts. The audiences feel, I mean, in theory, they're the same, like the same people or type of people, maybe not, but their action is different in different platforms.
I think there's a specific difference between like, people who subscribe, one, probably because they get that notification on their phone. Like I noticed I'm, first of all, very bad at social media. I'm not invested enough to do it regularly.
How much do you think it matters? Like, I am very curious, just to interrupt.
Well,
I
was
did
just gonna say, because what often happens is I'll release an episode and I don't generally post about it until at least the day after.
Right.
Like that's on most occasions, that's probably about as good as it gets. And the vast majority of my listens are still on the day that the show is released.
Right. Subscribers.
Consistently.
Right? Yeah.
So I can't say that it makes a ton of difference. And I've I spend a lot of time feeling guilty about not posting as much, but when I look at the direct effect,
it doesn't. We've talked about on here where social is like, it's like that billboard that makes people aware, like it exists. Like I put out a new episode, but it's not easy to move. You don't move people from one thing they're doing into like 45 minutes of doing another thing. That podcasts are very unique, right? Cat video, I can watch that for 30 seconds. Podcast is a commitment, right? And so people go into their podcast app because they're ready for that commitment. Danielle, you're saying you break up your stuff. Do you use that on social?
I'm also the type of person that I don't really do a lot of promotion the day of because I just want to see my organic audience. Yeah. And the thing I love about my audience is that like right now I'm on a 4-month summer break and I still get downloads every single day. So it's just its own entity that's just kind of going off without me having to constantly feed these social media beasts. But I do have some WordPress plugins that allows actual posts to go out every like 10 hours or 5 hours. So that's something recent. But for the most part, I just let my audience just have fun, and enjoy the content that I spent a lot of time creating. Yeah. Do you,
and maybe Derek, I'll ask you, related to, I don't know how much social you do around your podcast, but what do you find to be most effective? If you can even tell in like getting more downloads?
I have never seen a actual correlation between it. Like I could post a new episode, tag all the proper tags and guests and who we promote for that episode, and I'll see maybe 2 click-throughs, which odds are they probably didn't subscribe just from that click-through. But the other side of that is, like I was actually talking to one of my co-hosts about this the other day. Like every week I have just a kind of trying to think of how to word it. It's basically like an inspirational type of post, like from a podcaster who's been doing it for a few years, creating's hard, power through, ask for help, or just a reminder of, hey, go drink water. You need to drink water. Here's your reminder to go drink water. Just little things like that. I will see 5-6 times the amount of impressions and link click-throughs to my profile and stuff like that. So it's really just about, at least for me, like Twitter specifically, it's just about like as a listener, it gives me a chance that if I want to interact with the show and just say, hey, I enjoyed this episode, and they tweet back at me, thanking me for it or asking what I liked or engaging that conversation, I get that little bump of adrenaline, like, oh, they noticed me, even though, they're the same doing the same exact thing that I'm doing.
It serves a different function, I think, and maybe a more important function, which you're alluding to. And I talk about the content between the content. So like your podcast is like, it's the main course, right? But then in all that time until the next one comes around, you're still talking to your audience, right? Or your friends or peers or whatever. Like, and I think that's probably the main, you're saying you're seeing more pickup from stuff that's, people might be following you because of your podcast, but having like a little tip that is none related or having a real conversation are the things that actually do more to get attention, which makes total sense. So yeah, I think we all feel a lot of pressure to, I think I just tweeted about, I put a video out and I said that high you get of pressing publish on a video only to suddenly be brought down by the fact that you realize I got to work on the next one like right now, right? That's the grind. That's the beast you're talking about, Danielle. Like that's how I feel.
Yeah.
The biggest thing that I found that pushes the needle forward for me and my podcast is being a guest on other folks' podcasts. Like it's just such a seamless, it's just like literally they just go ahead and follow me right after, subscribe to my show right after. And I've been trying to do a better job at tracking those spikes. So I actually can see a direct correlation. I was on this podcast and my downloads have increased, especially right now. I'm on a break. I'm not producing any content. I'm not on social media promoting my podcast. So how did this happen? Right. And that for me, I found collaborations have been an extremely great way for me to continue growing my audience organically, which I love.
Yeah, it's the YouTube model, right? The collab. You see the big YouTuber gets on the other big YouTuber's channel. And it's exposure, like that audience learns. This is old podcast stuff. Like before YouTube, podcasters knew this. Like, right, Dave? It was
swaps and
the old Gimlet does this. You think?
Yeah.
Look here. Let's put it. Gimlet only exists because of one show, and it was startup, and it was a viral hit, and they didn't expect it. And I bet you every time they put a new show on their now network, they shoved it down the startup feed, right? And it's become a model. Like this is a model for networks that launch new shows, and it's smart. Like leverage the audience, leverage the attention you already gained, right? So that's interesting. I love that we like started with stories, and then we just had a conversation. That's 100% roundtable. That's what we're here for. Like for me, it's just a.
But no, I mean, I have people that tell me, oh, I heard you on the round table and decided to come over and, you seem to know what you're talking about. So I came over to check out your show. Adam Curry was on Joe Rogan, and he's had a few people that have actually donated to his show. And they're like, oh, I heard you on Rogan and I came over and I like your show, because both those shows are like 3 hours long. So they're kind of not only the same type of demographic, it's the same type of show. And the only difference is Joe's getting paid by Spotify and Adam's getting paid by donations.
Right. Danielle, you made me think of something, talking about you're on a break. And I don't think enough podcasters, they're when podcasting started, there used to be this sort of badge of honor to like, I never miss a week thing. Right. Yeah. Which we know just leads to one thing, and it's called burnout. Right. Like, and what's worse, like missing a week or going away forever. And we've covered burnout on this roundtable before, but you said you're on like a 4-month break, and then you're talking about how you're going to other shows. Like, I think that might be like a model, right? Two things happen: that you take a break that you need, that we all need, unless it's your job. Like, unless you got signed by Spotify and you have to make an episode that week, cool, you're getting paid. But for most of us, that's not, you might have revenue connected to your podcast, but it can still be made in the catalog, in the library. But then using that time, not producing episodes, like to go on other, like almost promotional, like go on other shows. When someone writes a book or has a new movie, where do you see them? On every talk show there is. Jimmy Fallon, like Conan, they're on everything, right? They do the circuit. So Danielle, I don't know if that was intentional at all, but are you using that time intentionally to sort of do things that you would be busy doing your podcast, but now you have more time? You're on this show, so you had a chance to come on here, right?
Yeah, this is the strategy. This is exactly my strategy. I take a break and
Okay.
I'm on other folks' show collaborating with those folks and building my audience in the background passively. And when I get back, I have this whole new, bigger, larger, excited audience who hasn't heard from me, and they've missed me. What I think is important when you are thinking about taking a podcast break is to let your audience know that you're going to go on a break. And I don't combine that with other episodes. It's its own solo farewell. See you next time in 4 months. So, and also the title of the episode is very clear. See you in October, or and I give them an actual date. So in the title, anyone who's coming on my feed could see that I am on a break, and I encourage them throughout the episode to go back to the archives. We have over 50, 60 episodes that you can take a listen to. So I think that education is really, really important, and you don't want to confuse your audience, especially if you're not present creating new content. But if you can guide them early on, as soon as they meet you, then they'll be like, okay, I'll wait for her in October. And then you have to be there. You have to make sure you're there the day that you said that you're going to be there, so that you could, again, keep that trust with your audience.
I am literally taking notes.
Goal.
I put out an episode, I think almost 2 weeks ago now, and we're not going to be producing anything until season 2 is released. And I put that, I always do like a little, message in the credits, like that's informational. But now I'm thinking about, doing an episode just to say like, hey, we're not going to be back until season 2, just so that everyone who, maybe everyone didn't listen. It was only 10 minutes, but, maybe everybody didn't listen to the end. So that's a really great idea. And Danielle, I've heard you talk about this, podcast tour that you do where you go on to other people's shows, and that's really wonderful. I've always thought it was a great idea, and I am the type of person, like, I need built-in breaks. I know who I am, and I'm not gonna put a show out every week 52 weeks a year. That's not my style. It feels very, and because my show is relatively new, we just started in October of 2018, so it feels very like big. It feels like a big thing to me to like be on other people's shows. I don't know.
It is big.
Learning, but I'm taking notes about all of this.
There's a difference.
Yeah, I think for me, because I am seen as like a financially savvy traveler, I talk mostly about affording travel, paying off debt, building wealth. So I have content pillars, and folks that I'm a guest on, they talk to me about my content pillars. So I am going on their shows talking about what I'm good at, and it's a very natural thing. It's easy for me. And again, all you have to do is just show up. You don't have to produce, and you don't have to do all of the back end, which is what I think happens when you're doing pod fade and you're just like, tired and exhausted, especially as an indie podcaster. So you can do it. I believe in you. I believe
that's why Dave shows up here. He's a co-host. He doesn't have to do anything. He just has to show up.
And like, what are we talking about? Great.
But also the other side of that, I mean, obviously, yes, you want to guest on podcasts that have a similar audience so you can get the bleed over there. Right. But I guest on so many different genres and styles of show, just because that's me taking a break. That's me just, yelling at my wall, and generally someone on the other side of the computer. But like, I did a podcast about drinking beer and just having updates with life and chatting with a friend that I've known for years in podcasting. And it was nice to have that break. Or like, I'm coming on here on the Podcasters Roundtable to talk about my experience in podcasting over the last few years, which is so different than what I do for my main shows. But it's important information out there. And, someone might follow me over and say, oh, he's insightful. I want to follow him on social media to get those inspirational things every week. And while I'm at it, why don't I go ahead and listen to his show?
Yeah.
Yeah, 100%.
And Derek, I always really love to hear from people who are doing like fictional or improvisational things. That's not a world that I live in, but I am fascinated by. So it's really good to hear your perspective too.
Well, and Danielle hit the nail on the head. The key to this is you have to keep your audience informed. Mike Rowe does, that's the way I heard it. And he said, hey, I got good news and bad news. The good news is I got a book deal. The bad news is I can't do a book and the podcast. So I'm going away, and I will be back on this date. I will be back. And on that date, he came back and said, hey, guess what? The book's available for pre-order, and I got more bad news. We're turning the podcast into a TV show. So my schedule is going to be all fluey. I'm not sure what's going on at this point, but I'll put them out as soon as I can. But the whole point is to to keep your audience there, because if you just kind of just all of a sudden aren't there, they go, that's odd. And then by week 2, they're like, and by week 3, they found something else to listen to. Cause and that's the only reason why, cause I'm the king of 15 years, haven't missed a Monday, but that's because my audience doesn't quit listening. And so I've got that. I mean, Glenn, the Geek Hebert, is listening to me on Monday morning in the shower. That's easy. It sounds weird, but I shower with Glenn on Monday. and if I don't show up,
that's a podcast.
Yeah. Glenn is,
showering with Glenn.
And if I don't show up, A, either Glenn's going to be dirty, and I don't think that's the case, or B, he's going to find somebody else to listen to. And I don't know. I'm too insecure.
It's a good point, because I always talk about okay, I didn't produce an episode for 5 weeks, but who unsubscribes? You hear these people are like, oh, I unsubscribe. Like, why would you? I love this thing. If an episode happens to come into the feed, I don't have to do anything. It shows up. I'm happy about it. But Dave, the important point there is that people will fill that time.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So people do carve out time for you in their life, and there's only so much of that, and they will fill that spot if you're not there, and you don't communicate that you're not there. So you do podcast and you think, oh, well, yeah, I'll put something in the feed like 5 weeks from now. And I'm actually, this hits too close to home for me. I'm talking about myself here. Not very good at leaving shows that just sort of hang there. But that's a good point. People might not unsubscribe, but they will fill that time, which is the most valuable thing people have at this point.
Well, it's funny you mentioned that. I have a show that's been gone for 3 years. I just like, hey, I said all I have to say about this. I'm done. Thank you so much. Here's my favorite things from the past 10 years. Thank you. Good night. And after 3 years, I'm like, I could probably say a couple. So I was like, hey, I put on an episode. Hey, I took the word weekly out of it. And Weekly Web Tools is now Web Tools Radio. And it used to get about 300 downloads an episode.
Why do you mean radio? Come on, Dave. What are you
because that was the domain that was available. I mean, straight up, that's
radio.
No, it's webtoolsradio.com.
All right. Couldn't you got like rad.io or something?
I like .coms. I'm old school.
We know you like .com.
Yeah. But 86 people. So I lost 2/3 of it, but that's 3 years of no episodes, nothing. Just like, hey, I'm done. Thank you. Good night. And people did not unsubscribe. So I was surprised to see that. I was happy. I was like, well, there's 86 people. I don't have to, beat over the head to listen to my show, but
let's dig into, so Aseloka, you said you like the sort of nonfiction. Is that what we said? There's a story here.
I like listening to nonfiction, and I always like hearing, just industry wise, I like hearing from, I'm sorry, I listen to fiction, and I like hearing from
fiction. Sorry, I said nonfiction.
Yeah.
So Derek, why don't you tell us about this story that has a direct correlation that I think Aseloka might enjoy, this Demi Moore story. So we got celebrity podcast again.
Yep. So actress Demi Moore is now a podcaster. Basically, she has teamed up with a network to produce and star in an audio drama called Dirty Diana. I believe it said it was 6 to 8 episodes in length. It's very much kind of like a Red Shoe Diary type of story from what I could hear in the trailer and whatnot. But that being said, honestly, it was very well produced. It sounds top tier as far as audio dramas go, which, I mean, I should hope she kind of has the budget for it, or at least the network would shell out the budget if they're bringing Demi Moore on.
Right.
But I just thought it was a really cool story to see that, right after we talked about all of these other podcasters that were going over to Spotify for exclusive deals, the Joe Rogans, the Michelle Obamas. Meanwhile, we have someone who was at one point an A-list Hollywood actor who decided, you know what, I still want to act, but I also want to do it over here. It's not part of Spotify. It's not part of HBO or anything like that. So I just thought it was actually really cool to see.
Yeah, she has a real shot of, it's funny because we see celebrity after celebrity start a podcast, right? That's the thing you do. In fact, I was getting coffee the other day with a mask on, wear a mask, people. And in the table outside next to me, they were going over the girls' podcasting possibilities. Like they're just figuring out what the podcast that she wants to do is going to be about. And so everyone is starting a podcast. I think that's actually true. It's not hyperbole at this point, but it's, it's podcast is the new blog. But when a celebrity starts one, half the time it's a celebrity. You're like, I don't care. And I think, oh, how is this? Is this good? Is this bad? Does it matter? And it works every time for one reason. They already have a following, right? They're not like most of us who are like, I'm going to start a podcast. Like that girl at the table. She's like, I'm going to start a podcast. And I literally, I wanted to join in the conversation, but I had to go to work. But because, you hear them bouncing around, you're like, oh, I've got this idea and we'll just sort of talk about my life and stuff. And it's like, you have no following. Like no one's going to find that. And it's totally valid for you to start a podcast like that. If that's what you want, you just have to tame your expectations of what that's going to be. People think, I'm going to start a podcast. I'm just going to find this audience and it's going to be amazing. I'm going to make money and stuff. Right. So, Demi Moore has a following or name recognition, and enough people are going to tune in just for that. But she has a real shot at maybe being successful because it's not just celebrity interviews celebrity.
Exactly.
She's doing a thing that's tangible that someone might be interested in outside of her name. So sort of a double whammy there. Yeah. Dave, you look like you.
Well, Rami Malek, right after he won his Academy Award, starred in a podcast called Blackout. So it's another one. The other thing about Demi Moore, she's got a great voice. Like she has that cool kind of raspy kind of thing.
Yeah, you're right.
Good so voice.
You don't have to have a good voice to podcast, but it doesn't hurt.
Well, you know what? Instead of it's unique.
Yeah,
that's the key.
Better. Yeah, you're right. Unique is definitely.
Because I mean, like Dr. Dave does shrink wrap radio, and Dr. Dave kind of sounds like this. Welcome to shrink wrap radio. And the minute you hear him, you're like, hey, that's Dr. Dave, because that's what he sounds like. And he does. It's like it's awesome. Todd Cochran sounds like Todd Cochran.
No comment.
Yeah. Good morning, everyone.
Hey, that Dave, that's not a bad impression. Todd, if you're watching, you have to agree.
Yeah.
Wow, it's hot here. I'm sweating. How many podcasts do you have? Can we show each other on our hand? I now have, can we do half? Like, how many podcasts? I'm not gonna ask Dave. Derek, you sound like you have several.
I have 2 shows that are active shows.
There's 2 questions here. How many have you had, and how many do you have?
Oh.
Plus add how many have I contributed to.
How many do you want to make?
I ran out of fingers for that. I have 2 active shows. I have 1 past show that is no longer listed. It's been taken down everywhere. It was a weekly news show, video game news specifically. So timely content. I didn't think.
Yeah,
it didn't really. Like, I still have the audio if I ever wanted to do anything with it, but people aren't going to tune into a news story, a year ago or 2 years ago.
And then, sorry, Bangs in the chat, he said this, and I forget what we were talking about exactly, but he said that's why Apple doesn't prune dead podcast. And so that was, your 3-year hiatus, right?
Yeah.
So Derek voluntarily took a show out, and because it is timely, and other than like maybe some vague interest in what was happening in 2009 or something, like it doesn't add a lot of value. I guess you never know. Value is a hard thing to sort of gauge.
I mean, if a video game historian ever wants all of that, I have the audio to send them. You don't have to find it on Apple. Yeah. But I currently have 2 active shows. I have Rolling Misadventures, which is my baby. And then I'm also a co-host on another show called Life World. And then I've been doing little bits and pieces here for another show called Listen, Rinse, Repeat, which is 30-second to...
I like the name.
It was 30 to 60-minute audio dramas or just podcast episodes. So basically the length of time to wash your hands.
Very relevant.
Yeah. And so I've submitted a couple episodes to that as well. And then I've done a handful of voice acting spots on other various audio dramas.
Aseloka, how many shows have you had? Maybe
I used to have, currently have a show called Regular Black Radio that I do not produce anymore. The feed is still live, and I plan to bring it back at some point, but
we all do.
Right. But life and stuff. And then, of course, I have the Colored Girl Beautiful now.
And Danielle, how about you? I'm not going to ask Dave.
Only one. I only have the capacity for one.
Well, you're running
But
a
I do-
Good.
yeah, but
Yeah,
I
but
also
instead of
have
deciding instead of saying I'm going to start another podcast, she's like, I'm going to start a conference.
Right.
Oh my
I'm going to start a
gosh.
conference
That's like 4
in a community of over 3,000 people
Yeah.
and take over the
I
world.
know.
For
Take
women
over
of
the
color.
world.
That equals at least 4 podcasts.
Build an empire.
Oh, just that. Yeah. But I do have a blog. I have a blog, which is like I'm still creating content, long form content as well. So yeah, I just have that one for now.
Do you find the blog, is there a crossover?
Yeah, the blog is actually the same as the podcast. I would say like the same brand. So it's a lot of the same branding.
Oh, wait, are these on the same website? Because then I start to ask, like, what's the real difference? Because the podcast is just a blog with an audio player on it. Like, right? Like, what's the real difference? Like, okay, this is very interesting to me.
This is show notes details.
Show notes,
Yes.
but is that just a blog post? What's the difference? Like,
Yeah.
why are show notes just not a blog post? And or why do people not approach it that way? I don't know. Danielle, what do you do? Let us know.
So I have 2 separate sites. So I have thoughtcard.com and then podcast.thoughtcard.com. So I created a subdomain for my podcast. I think if I would redo it, I would just keep them all together under one brand. And now it's just it's just huge now. I'm just going to leave it like that.
Easy cake.
Redirect?
Export, import, done.
Okay, I'll talk to you offline, Dave. Thank you.
I think he just volunteered to do it.
I am overwhelmed. I'm like, I don't know how to do this. So I'll just leave it as 2 separate, but I would definitely combine them 2 together. Yeah. I think of my show notes as an abbreviated, like a short, brief blog post. So I'll make sure to include, like, in this episode, we cover bullet points. And in a blog post, I really just make that standalone content, and I really go in depth with each of the points that we talk about. So there is for me a big difference, but I think if you're a blogger, you have all the skills that you need to podcast and create show notes as well.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Does anyone else write like almost a blog post for your show notes? Like, does anyone think about, what do you think about? Here's one, because I'm terrible at show notes, especially for this show. It's just not a thing I'm going to do. I will put the links we talk about. That's about all I need to do. Like, this show exists as a conversation. It's fine. There are some accessibility issues, which I want to get into on the roundtable, but how do you approach show notes? Let's just leave it. Let's just go with that. Derek.
I have a little 1 to 2 paragraph blurb that will tie you into the story, just like if you were reading a movie synopsis on IMDb or Wikipedia or wherever like that, to introduce the concept of what is the setting of our story, what are the character names, and just kind of the main, at least how the story starts out. Or because most of our stories are 2 episodes long, here's how the cliffhanger left off. So here's where we're picking up from. And then from there, it's, content warnings, links to whoever we ran a promo for on that episode, links to any guests that we had play on those episodes, as well as links to just my normal co-hosts as well, just down at the bottom saying, hey, if you want to check out more stuff, here's some more content for you. And then links to all of our normal stuff, like the website, social media, things like that.
Cool. And Aseloka, how do you approach your show notes?
So I have my show notes are always just like a really brief, maybe sentence or 2 about the content of the episode, and then all of the relevant information. So the website, our social media. I also make sure to include any information like the social media of the guests that's on the show, so that people can find them as well. And I put all of that information, literally all of the same stuff, into a blog post that then goes into the newsletter. So all of that is, circles back and goes out to the people who, not everybody is subscribed. A lot of people like getting the email about the show. Like, I have friends who know me personally and they're like, did you send out an email? What? I don't know if they just don't. Either they don't use a subscription feature or what have you, but I put all of the relevant information, all my links to the store, how you can donate, all of that jazz goes in the show notes every single time.
So I actually do have a really quick story, a monetization story about my show notes. So I had a guest on who went off a year, 2 years later to create this multi-million-dollar business. At the time when we did our interview, she was just starting out. Now I became an affiliate for her product, and her name, whenever her name pops up on Google search, I am the number 2. My Rinky Dinky blog post is the number 2. And they go listen to her episode, but I have some affiliate links on there as well. And each affiliate sale is giving me over $400. Wow. So it could be profitable. It could be profitable if you take the time to create some show notes that will get picked up by Google and by search engines. So that's my little story of how I'm making some money on the side.
Well, that's what I'm curious about, because with Google Podcasts now, right, and they're sort of indexing the web, and they're going to, in theory, try to surface podcasts, and specifically, when you ask a question in Google, you get results. I think sometimes you get video. At some point, you're going to get podcast, and Google's going to know this part of the podcast has your answer in it. I think that it's a big stretch, because most of the time people are asking a question that they're not going to get it from listening to 5 to 10 minutes of audio. They just want to read the one sentence that tells them the answer. But in some cases, it will really apply. And Danielle, in your case, it's just more exposure to that person someone's already looking for. So I don't know, Dave, you look like you had something relevant about.
Yeah. Well, I would have like my bullet points. I'm ready to go, because I have to have bullet points, because otherwise I am all over the place. So I get my 4 bullet points, and I used to record into that. And then after I edited it, and as I'm uploading it and I'm listening to it back, I would then expand on my bullet points to make my blog post. And after about the 4th time of typing it, for some reason, I would go, oh, you know what? Another point I wish I would have said was blank. And then it was a matter of like, am I going to go back and re-record that part? So I just stopped doing the recording first. I now get my 4 bullet points, and that's what I'm going to still riff on when I do my podcast. But I type up this long extended thing, because that helps me flesh out the idea. And 9 times out of 10, I'm like, oh, you know what? This is going to be, 8 ways to blah, blah, blah. I just came up with number 9, and so I kind of like the blogging part to help me flesh out the idea. And then Google loves good, words. So I'm hoping that helps too. So.
I like good words. They do like good words. Where does that put everyone in the sort of the transcript world?
No. Oh my God. I just did that. I transcribed an interview, and you got to realize this. If it's 80%, 90, let's go 90% accurate. That means every 100 words, you're changing 10. And the amount of time that it took to go in and fix the transcript till it was readable, I was like, I'm either when I'm rich and famous, I'll pay somebody to do this. But I'm like, I was like, I could have typed this up in half the time. Anyway, Aseloka, you were going to say something.
No, I was literally just going to ask like what people do about transcripts, and if you like, is that its own blog post? Does that go in the blog post where the show notes are? Like, I was just curious about what people are doing.
I like Hanny Murrah's plugin, because it somehow makes a button that says, if you want to see the transcript, click here. Right. So it's there so Google can find it, but it's not there for the human that goes, wait, what? Who writes like this?
Yeah, and I know a handful of audio dramas that will put out transcripts. For the couple episodes I did for Listen, Rinse, Repeat, I've put, because they're only, a minute long, I put my script into the show notes, because it's not that long. It doesn't take a whole lot to scroll through it. Plus, it's a script, so it's already written out and transcribed for me.
Nice.
But I know some shows will put them up on their websites. They'll have a specific link there saying, here's where our transcripts are. It'll link in the show notes as well to take them to that page for that episode. But as far as for like Rolling Misadventures, it's completely improvised, completely unscripted. Man. And I would love to put the transcripts out there. But again, to Dave's point, I've tried running through like Otter.io or going through YouTube. And yeah, it's, especially once I have, backing music and sound effects, and I'm taking those old episodes and bringing them in. Now I've got that interference. I've got us doing bad accents for some of the characters that doesn't translate well either. So it comes down to, if I had the money to pay someone to transcribe, absolutely, I would love to do it. But as it stands now, I do everything else for the show myself. I don't really have the time in the day to do that.
Yeah, it feels like there's an accessibility issue. Like ideally, yes, would have transcripts so no one is excluded from the content, but it also feels like transcripts are a person with budgets game. Like it can be expensive and even a time budget. I mean, it's hard enough to do a podcast. So this is going to be solved, right? Like Google is going to do this. I am amazed at how accurate YouTube actually is at this, which means how accurate Google is at this. And Google's doing it for their own purpose. They want to find out if the answer to someone's Google question is in your content so they can surface it and then put ads on it. Like it all makes sense, right? So I am hoping for the sake of just accessibility that someone will solve it, and it will happen. It's not going to happen fast enough, but it's a difficult thing because that there are some people that can't consume it. But at the same time, we're doing hour and a half long podcast. It's very difficult at best to get a transcript out there.
You don't have $113 to get it transcribed once a week?
Patreon.com/Ray. I'll make it a goal.
Yeah.
I'm on a mission to get my transcripts up because the accessibility thing is something that I think matters. It's meaningful, and I want to create space for that. And I can't say that it's something that I care about and then not, carve out the time to actually do it. And since season 2, for example, isn't coming out, until this fall, that's something that I can prepare for and plan and over the next several months build into my workflow. So I'm working very slowly at it.
Yeah, I think what I might do, because I use Otter as well, is go through and get the horrible stuff. Because I remember I saw somebody had put it up and they were talking about Sarah Koenig, who I forget how to spell her name, but they made it 3 names, like Sarah K. Nig. And I'm like, nope, not even close. But I was thought, go through it once, get the horrible, obvious stuff out, and then just put at the top, this transcript was created by a robot. So my apologies, but it's better than nothing. And I don't know. I'm not sure if I'm crazy about that for my brand, but I was like, it's for somebody who needs something to read. They're like, oh my gosh, this is more than enough because I was getting nothing before. So I'm kind of like, maybe that's,
But then you also have people that are just hard of hearing. They might not be deaf. They can listen to an episode for the most part, but they might miss those little bits. And if I put up a transcript just straight from Otter, I haven't cleaned it up anything. Yeah. And that word that they messed up or that name that they split into 3 parts might have been the thing that they couldn't hear. So that does them no good either.
Yeah.
It's tough.
I think the key is to maybe make those transcripts, if you're starting it, some sort of trackable link, because you may be going through all this work and 3 months later, you're like, wow, a couple thousand people downloaded my podcast and 2 people downloaded the transcript. That's where you got to go. I love those 2 people. I care about you, but like you're taking hours and money, and it's like, boy, it's tough. It's tough. Because right there, my heart goes, nah, I couldn't do it. I'd still have to do it for those 2, but it's tough.
Yeah.
And you can put a PDF into a podcast feed. So if you're making transcripts now, you need to include the PDF, I think.
I've had really good experiences with Otter with, there's always things that need to be corrected, but I'm going to say 97% of what I get back has always been accurate. I'm actually
not even, this is a free transcription, I guess, service.
Yeah. Otter.ai.
Okay.
.ai. OTTR.ai.
I pay, I think it's $10 a month, which is nothing for like 6 hours. It is fun for editing because I interviewed Dan Miller, who's this awesome guy, but it also, and this points out what you say as well.
On his website. Dan Miller, awesome guy.
Awesome guy. But he says the word golly a lot.
Oh,
and you don't, and I love the word like and apparently, because you see it over and over and over, and it's like, holy cow.
So, all right. Well, hey, we did hit an hour. I invited all these kind people to be here, and I didn't say you have to be here more than an hour. So I should probably let everyone go. I think we covered most of the stories. I'm happy. This is a good round. Yeah. Let's go around the round table. Again, give us well, we talked about multiple shows. Give us one show you'd like this audience to check out, or event, whatever you want. And if you have anything else to add, go ahead, because we aren't hard time limit here. But then we'll work our way out. So Derek, thanks for joining us again. Your first roundtable was a blast.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I had a wonderful time. If you want to check out my show, go check out Rolling Misadventures. You can search for it pretty much anywhere. If I'm not there, then go to my website, rollingmisadventures.com. Let me know. But basically, subscribe to the show, listen to it. If you are looking for 1 to 2 episode improv audio dramas, generally comedic, although we do have some heart-wrenching stories in there as well, across multiple settings. So if you want space horror, we've got it. If you want a Western gay love triangle, we've got it. If you want Sesame Street meets the Mothman Prophecies, we have not done that one. That is on my list. I'll get to it at some point, I swear.
Oh man, you've touched the heart of at least one person. So if only one person subscribes, that's all we're asking for. One at a time. It's how we build audience. If you're not watching the video version of this, and most of you are listening to the audio only, Derek has some stuff in his background. Everyone's got a little something in the background. But it's not your own shows. It's like, I guess that's cred for like the video game stuff. Like you got Rock Band.
Yeah, I got all the video game, but like actually right behind me there, that is my podcaster sticker, which at some point I need to bring it closer.
So closer. Yeah, all right. Like Dave used to have the pictures of all his listeners behind him, but he trashed it for a big brand logo. I'm not sure what happened. They must feel great about that.
They're on the back of the door now.
On the back of the move to the back. That's right. All right. Okay, Derek, thanks. Awesome. Aseloka, thank you so much for joining us.
Absolutely. I am over at the Colored Girl Beautiful podcast, coloredgirlbeautiful.com. If you're looking for something to listen to besides the Colored Girl Beautiful, there's my producer just put out a passion project of hers called The Secret Adventures of Black People. And it's a wonderful show. They're really short episodes and beautifully done.
Nice.
Just little sort of regular life stories about, things that are happening in people's lives. So it's definitely worth a listen.
That's so cool. You sound so professional when you say my producer. Like not a lot of us can say, check out my producer's show.
I am fortunate to be able to work with her. She's amazing.
Is that like a friendship thing? Is it a paid thing? Is it a partner?
Yeah, nice. But she's also my friend. She is a wonderful. She's probably one of the most capable people I know of ever in life. And we found each other really randomly at through someone that I met at Third Coast. He introduced me to her, and so we haven't even known each other that long.
Is Third Coast, is that a radio thing or is that a podcast?
It's an audio festival. So most of the people who attend, who work at public radio stations, attend Third Coast, or have some sort of storytelling background, attend Third Coast. So but it's a wonderful working relationship that I feel very fortunate to have, because we work really well together. So
that's awesome. Well, thank you so much. That is a push and a great transition to Danielle, who has a conference. I'd say that's a great reason to go to a conference. Conferences can, oftentimes they cost money. It's an investment. You don't know if you're going to get that back. And, Dave and I have been to a million conferences for podcasts, and it's hard to say that I necessarily saw a direct return on that money, but because it is about meeting people most of the time, and being present, and obviously a little harder to do virtually. Danielle, maybe you can tell us how you're tackling that, but anyways, it was really just a way to say, Danielle has a conference. Thanks for joining us. You should check that out. Danielle.
Yes. I am super excited because Podthon, what we're doing is we're increasing representation of speakers of color all over the world. And we understand that we have a global audience, and going to, let's say, Orlando or going to another destination may be really hard for folks. So virtual, 100% virtual. We use Zoom, and Zoom has this awesome feature called breakout rooms. Right. So you could have networking sessions and coffee breaks. So super excited about that. You can head over to podthon.com to grab your tickets. And for me, my personal brands, I'm the Thought Card podcast and thoughtcard.com. And if you are a woman of color looking for a community, we have Women of Color Podcasters. Again,
Amazing. You should join.
yeah, over 3,300 women now. And yeah, we're over 2 years now. So just keep enrolling.
Very cool. And so I would imagine even at a virtual conference, you have people who are still shy, right? So breakout room, do you do anything that encourages people to meet people they don't already know? Because if I go to a conference, it's dangerous that I might just talk to Dave the whole time and I won't meet anyone else because I don't get to see Dave in person. So it is awesome, but also it's like, it's hard to talk to people you don't know. And I would say even virtually, that's probably a challenge.
Yes. So we've enabled the private chat so folks can see a name or see someone that they want to talk to privately. And we also have icebreakers that we're planning as well. And we're going to try to piggyback off of some of the keynote sessions. So after a session, we're going to lead like, hey, what were your biggest takeaways? What were some of the things that you thought were interesting? And also being able to connect off of Zoom as well. So connect on social media or LinkedIn.
Very cool. All right. Something big is going to happen. I'm excited for those people. I'm excited for everyone. That's very cool. So everyone should check that out. Dave Jackson, co-host, checks in the mail. Thanks again, man.
Yeah. To answer your question that you wouldn't ask me, 37 is the total number of shows that started.
Now you know why I didn't ask.
Yeah. Currently have 11 still going. And the one I want you to listen to, because I have no wife and children, or life for that matter. The one I want you to listen to is schoolofpodcasting.com, where you can hear great episodes on overcoming imposter syndrome, 30 ways to grow your audience, should you start a network, yada, yada, yada. Ray's in there somewhere, probably.
Yeah, somewhere.
And schoolofpodcasting.com.
Your babies are your podcast, Dave. And
That's it.
In some ways, it's probably more work than an actual kid. So more power to you. All right, everyone, podcastersroundtable.com/guest if you want to become one of these beautiful people and join us on the roundtable. Share your opinions. You know, what Derek was saying, like, it's something different. Like, you probably have a show that is not a podcast about podcasting, but the whole premise of the show is that you have a lot to share because you're doing it every day. So come share that with us, podcastersroundtable.com. And the audience will appreciate it. And we'd love to meet you. So we will see you next time for, I think, 147, close to 150. We like those numbers. They don't mean anything, but we do, those numbers are fun. All right. So we'll see you next time. That's it. Wave goodbye. We're out of here.
Bye.
Bye.